Today, it's your boy JJ Domination, and today we're going to be actually updating a list I did a while ago, and it was around the Pro Bowl time of the NFL calendar. It was around the Pro Bowl, maybe right before the Super Bowl, but I did a list talking about the top 10 non-NFL playoff teams that can make the playoffs in 2020, 2021. And I did a list dedicated to that, and I said in that video that we would be updating that list throughout the off-season, throughout free agency, the draft, training camp, preseason. And yeah, so this is going to be the post-first wave of free agency rankings. It's going to be an add-on to that video, so you'll see the title of it. I'll make sure it's condensed and, decent enough length for YouTube. And we're going to cover the 10 teams, and when we talk about all of these teams, I'll leave a little graphic or a little text talking about, how much these teams moved up and down my list, and teams that are new to the list that were just honorable mentions last time, and we'll basically be, given that kind of information, talking about why I feel like they're ranked here, why I feel like they should be positioned here on the list, and probably go over what they did in the offseason to get to this point. So we're going to go ahead and get to my number 10 team right now. So starting off here at number 10, we got the Cleveland Browns, who last time I did this list, they were here at number 10 as well. So no movement for them, even though they've done a lot of good things in the offseason. They aren't going to be moving up or down. They're going to be staying here at number 10. They've brought in Austin Hooper, Jack Conklin. They've taken some flyers on players like Andrew Billings at defensive tackle, Carl Joseph at strong safety. They currently sit at number 10 overall in the NFL draft, and Cleveland is having a good offseason, like a really good offseason in terms of building this team and this offense to the liking of Kevin Stefanski. They have their essential Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen duo, and OBJ and Jarvis Landry. They got their tight end duo that's like an imitation of Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith, but better in the form of Austin Hooper and David Njoku. They're bolstering up the offensive line by bringing in Jack Conklin, and my gut feeling is they'll take an offensive tackle at number 10 if there's one available, worth taking at that spot. And to me, Cleveland's been having a really good offseason, but again, the reason they don't move is because, well, obviously, of the teams in front of them, I either like or kind of dislike what they've done, but they still deserve to be on this list nonetheless. So for Cleveland, I really did want to move them up. I just couldn't, and I'll explain why with the next team we'll talk about at number 9. So at number 9 overall, and debuting on this list, will be the Arizona Cardinals. They were not on here when we did this list the first time around Pro Bowl, Super Bowl time. They were an honorable mention. They're making their debut here, and they have had a pretty active offseason. They just brought back right tackle Marcus Gilbert as of recording this, but that trade they made for DeAndre Hopkins is just insane, and to me, that instantly makes Arizona that much better. I mean, I'm already pretty high on Kyler Murray compared to most that I know in my circle, and I think he's going to have even a more insane season. And fun fact, I actually have Kyler Murray's rookie card, and let's just say that thing's going to be worth a lot more money within the coming years. So, that's definitely interesting. And then, of course, you look at the other signings they made, which includes taking defensive tackle Jordan Phillips on a 3-year, $30 million contract. To me, it's a little bit of an overpay for a guy who's really had one breakout year, but, hopefully he can build off of that momentum. Of course, they take a flyer on Devondre Campbell, who's a pretty solid linebacker from Atlanta, bringing in Devon Kennard from the Detroit Lions. So to me, they've had a pretty good offseason. I think as long as that defense can keep them in games, I'm pretty confident in what the offense can do. And don't surprise me if Arizona did actually make the playoffs. I think it's a long shot because of how deep the NFC runs, but I would not be surprised if they somehow made it. And at number 8, we have the Chicago Bears, man. They are moving down 5 spots for me. And a lot of it has to do with their offseason. They massively overpaid for Robert Quinn, in my opinion. 5 years, $70 million for a guy who just came off of a decent year for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, yeah, it's one of the best seasons for Robert Quinn in a long time, but the thing about the Chicago Bears, they play in a 3-4 defense. Robert Quinn much better as a 4-3 defensive end. Yes, that stuff matters. This isn't Madden where you can, shuffle things around and still have a similar overall. Like, yes, it does matter what scheme he's in, based on the production in his career, based on the results and how well he's played. And then they also brought in Jimmy Graham, 2 years, $16 million. They're already paying a tight end $8+ million a year. And a lot of people figured this team would take a tight end in the second round with their second selection in the second round. And they go out and give $8 million a year to Jimmy Graham. Like, what are you doing? The dude was clearly washed up with the Packers, and you're going out and paying him for 2 seasons. Like, come on, dude. And then you make a trade for Nick Foles, and the excuse that people are making to defend this move is, oh, well, there's familiarity with him and Matt Nagy because they worked with Doug Peterson, who worked with Andy Reid. Well, here's the thing about that excuse. We've heard that one before when he signed with Jacksonville, because the whole thing with him going to Jacksonville was his old, offensive coordinator or his old, offensive staff coach or whatever, John DeFilippo, was there, and, well, that didn't work out, did it? Because, yeah, he played 4 games, he was hurt, but in the 4 games he played, he didn't really look all that good. He kind of just looked like another dude out there, replacement level, starter at times. He had 1 decent game, I think, out of the 4, but obviously bad contract, and it was obviously enough for Jacksonville to not only sacrifice the dead cap hit they would be taking, but to just get this contract off the books in general. Just, to me, they've had a bad offseason. I don't think that the moves they made make them that much better necessarily. To me, it kind of makes them worse. I don't trust Nick Foles anymore. He's got to re-earn it with me. Robert Quinn, he had a decent year, but did you really have to cut your former first-round pick to bring this guy in for 5 years? Was it worth sacrificing Leonard Floyd to bring in Robert Quinn, who's gonna be on the decline pretty soon athletically, and I doubt in the last year of his contract he will be as good as Leonard Floyd has been, even though last year was kind of a mess season. So to me, those are the little things you got to think about, and that's why they're here at 8. I think they took a step down with their free agency process, and they're gonna have to have an A+ draft with the draft picks they have to kind of redeem it. And at number 7 is the Dallas Cowboys. They moved down 3 spots from number 4 for me, and a lot of it is because their offseason has been up and down. It starts out kind of weird because Dak Prescott gets the exclusive rights tag, which means he makes a top 5 salary instead of a top 10 average salary or something like that. So you're technically paying him more than the franchise tag. But what's good about it is it seems like they're moving into the right direction with contract talks. We'll see where it ends up. Will he get a new contract by the July 15th deadline? We'll see. They brought back Amari Cooper, 5 years, $100 million, but they lost a ton of free agents. And you can argue Amari Cooper's not worth the $100 million. I'll listen to it. I think he shouldn't be that highly paid, but again, it's a part of being a free agent. You're free, so you're going to get money. And apparently he turned down less or more money from the Redskins to stay there, but they lost Byron Jones, which was pretty much expected. Jason Witten, Malik Collins, Randall Cobb, Jeff Heath. They've lost a ton of free agents, They paid their guys, which is good. I mean, you kind of had to pay Dak Prescott. That's kind of the situation you're in by giving him the exclusive rights tag and paying Amari Cooper. I mean, again, you're kind of, your hand is forced there. You're kind of in that situation. You have to. But you knew you were going to have to sacrifice depth along your team, on your team. But they were able to re-sign some of their guys. Anthony Brown, they re-signed. They brought in Gerald McCoy and Dante Repoe. And while I don't agree with the length of the McCoy contract, I think the per year or how much money he'd make over that 3 years is good. I think that's a good, contract for a guy like him. But the big news is Travis Frederick retiring because of that rare blood disease that he had, which is one of those 3%ers that people get. and it's forced them to not play football, and it kind of sucks because to me that's the biggest loss of their offseason. Yeah, you could argue Byron Jones, but losing a Pro Bowl caliber center, arguably one of the best centers in the game, arguably outside of like Jason Kelsey and Alex Mack. I mean, you're losing one of the best centers in football because of it, and to me that's the biggest loss. That's why I have to move Dallas down, plain and simple. They've lost more than they gained this offseason. That's kind of how this works. And at number 6, we got to go with the Indianapolis Colts, moving up 3 spots. They've had a pretty intriguing offseason, I'd say. They re-signed Anthony Costanzo to a 2-year deal. They're bringing in Phillip Rivers for a 1-year deal. I wasn't a huge fan of like Phillip Rivers going pretty much anywhere else except the Colts. I think the Colts was just like the right situation for him. And a lot of it has to do with the offensive line. Yeah, the weapons is a downgrade from what you had with the Chargers, but there's still good weapons in Indianapolis. T.Y. Hilton is definitely still a very good receiver. The running backs, I mean, yeah, it's like a poor man's Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler, but Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines can play. Definitely. The rest of the receiving crew, Zach Pascal, Paris Campbell, those guys are fine, but they're also younger. They need more time to develop. And with Phillip Rivers out there, who knows, man? Maybe that could work. Again, we'll see, though, with Phillip Rivers. They made a trade to get DeForest Buckner. I love the trade for both sides between the Colts and the 49ers. And then they gave DeForest Buckner an extension, which I thought was big. That was a good extension because even though it is a lot of money for an interior defensive lineman, what he does to impact the game is huge. And while the 49ers will be fine because they have a ton of first-rounders on the defensive line, to me, he was arguably the best player on that defensive line outside of maybe Nick Bosa. And then finally, before I hit record, like 45 minutes ago, they signed Xavier Rhodes on basically a 1-year prove-it deal. I'm not really a big Xavier Rhodes guy these days. Yeah, I acknowledge he had the one great elite season, but people are like, oh, you're trashing him. Why you trashing him? Well, because he's been garbage for 2 years. What do you want me to say? Xavier Rhodes has not been that guy in a while. He drastically fell off, dude. I mean, it happens. He declined after that one great year. 2018, he was okay. He was okay, but he fell off. And 2019, you know how Madden's regression system is? Yeah, that's what Xavier Rhodes went through. He went through Madden's regression system. He went like -6 in speed and, like -20 in awareness and like -10 across the board in coverage. Yeah, the guy fell off. I mean, it is what it is. But a 1-year flyer, kind of like what they're doing with Phillip Rivers, it's not a bad thing. Worst thing that happens, he's trash like he already is. But maybe this will kind of rejuvenate him in a way. But we'll see. I'm not the biggest fan of it. But the Colts, hey, to me, they have an easier path than a lot of the teams on this list to get to the playoffs. Because the Titans, you never know. Maybe they take a step down. Maybe they don't. Jacksonville, they're pretty much committing to the rebuild again. And for the Texans, they're kind of in shambles. I don't really know about them. Like, obviously, they're talented enough to win the division. But I don't know. This division, I think the Colts could come in and take it. That's just the way it's looking. And at number 5, we got the Atlanta Falcons. They've had themselves a hell of an offseason. Moving up 2 spots right there. They've had themselves a hell of an offseason. And, for a team that was as cap-strapped as they were in terms of, like, what they could do in free agency, they did a really good job. They came out of this thing with Dante Fowler Jr., and then they took a 1-year flyer on a Todd Gurley, who is not only not necessarily a hometown guy, but he went to college at Georgia. I think he's from Baltimore, but he went to college here. He claims Georgia to basically be his home, so, much love. I like seeing that personally because I am a Georgia fan. That is my college team, so it's good to see him returning to Georgia. It's great to see. I hope his knee and everything is fine. It's a low-risk move by the Falcons. And it's a move that I actually like. And then, of course, the trade for Hayden Hurst. To me, the Falcons have had a great offseason, and they've been in like a shittier situation than some of the teams that have sat back and did nothing, or some of the teams that have kind of forced themselves to overspend. Like, the Falcons have done a great job this year managing things, and if that 2-year rough patch they just went through ends up paying off and like them being a deep playoff team, like, it wouldn't surprise me, because if they can just shore up, the secondary a little bit more, then who knows, man, this team could definitely like go places. Last year I thought they'd be a playoff team. They weren't, but geez, the way they looked that second half of the season, they looked like a team you didn't want to play. And the 49ers found that out firsthand in my upset of the week, probably my upset of the year, because I called it. But yeah, great stuff, Falcons. I'm definitely rooting for you. You're the local team. I'm a Packer fan at heart, always going to be. But it's always good to see the local team do good. You know what I'm saying? And then at number 4 right here, we got the Los Angeles Chargers moving up 2 spots from number 6 on the previous iteration of this list. And they've had themselves a hell of an offseason. They've brought in Chris Harris Jr., Linval Joseph, Brian Balaga. They've had themselves a hell of an offseason, and they're looking pretty good. You can argue they're a quarterback away, but we've seen Tyrod Taylor a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, the last time Jacksonville was good, take that team to the wild card for like the first time in the 21st century. So Tyrod's definitely capable of being serviceable at best, maybe pushing for a wild card spot, but obviously you could do better at the quarterback position. There are options out there. The question is, will they look to sign a Cam Newton or a Jameis, or are they going to go to the draft? And to me, I think they go draft a quarterback, but Tyrod can definitely start off the season. Will he finish the season as the starter? That's a whole different question. But looking at this roster, the way it's constructed, all the moves they've made, they look like they're making a push to challenge Kansas City, who have lost some depth on their team. They just lost like Kendall Fuller at corner. They haven't re-signed Rashad Breeland at corner. The Chiefs have low-key been losing some depth on that team. I'm not saying they'll be overthrown by the Chargers, but they're making a good case for it. The Chargers have definitely had a great offseason based on all the moves they've made, but the highest I can put them is number 4 for right now, because I'm just impressed with the other 3 teams. And then at number 3 on this list, man, debuting on this list, no longer an honorable mention, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who would have thought, man? Tom Brady to Tampa Bay, TB to TB as he's now trademarking it. Wow. I mean, I did not see that coming. I thought he would have stayed in New England, or maybe outside chance goes to Tennessee. But damn, he goes to Tampa Bay. And the thing is, it's going to be the reality. It's going to be weird as hell. But, dude, it was weird when I was a kid seeing Brett Favre in a Jets jersey and then seeing him in a Vikings jersey. And I'm pretty sure for you, some of your favorite players growing up, I bet it was weird to see him in a different jersey if they did switch teams. Like, I know for Cowboys fans, it had to have been weird seeing Emmitt Smith in a Cardinals jersey. And I know for 49ers fans, it had to have been weird seeing Joe Montana in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform. Like, I know it had to have been weird to see those things happen. Like, I know in basketball, like, Patrick Ewing ended up going to the Supersonics, and, like, no, it didn't look right, because, he was New York, and then he goes to Seattle. Like, that's weird. It didn't look right on him. But that's kind of how it works sometimes. But listen, let's talk about this team and not how weird it's going to be to see Brady wearing those colors. But listen, this is a young defense who in the second half of the season improved. They started gelling together, stepping up their game. And Todd Bowles is a really good defensive coordinator, not necessarily a good head coach, as we saw with the Jets. But he's a good coach on the defensive side of the football, and he knows what he's doing. This Tampa Bay team has put together a good veteran coaching staff together to get the most out of these young players and to relate to these young players. And then you look at the offense. Bruce Arians, of course, we know what he wants to do. He wants to air it out. He wants to just get that passing game going. Keep defenses on their heels in the secondary especially. Just wear them out with different concepts, different looks, vertical, passing game, you name it. And, this offense was one of the best offenses in football with Jameis Winston, who obviously was a 5,000-yard passer and was like second in the league in passing touchdowns behind the MVP, Lamar Jackson. And this team went 7-9 last year with Jameis Winston, who was the most hot and cold quarterback I've ever seen last year. So, to me, they're in a good spot. If Brady can just be efficient and just, I guess, sail that Tampa Bay Raymond James Stadium ship, they're going to go places. I mean, this defense, the way they looked at the end of the year, if they can carry that over this upcoming year, they're going to be pretty good. And this team is going to be pretty good. And, man, just imagine how salty, like, Falcons and Panthers and Saints fans would be if Tampa Bay, within 1 year, just went from being the laughingstock in that division to the team that they have to fear and game plan for. How crazy would that be that they have to game plan and fear a 43-year-old quarterback? And at number 2, we got the Denver Broncos, man. No movement for me. I'm pretty high on this Denver team. Entering this offseason, in the original video, they were number 2. And right here, we're going to keep them there. And they've made some really good moves. It was hard for me. I wanted to put them at number 1. I almost had to reshuffle the entire top 3. But, they went out and traded for Jarrell Casey. They went out and traded for A.J. Boye. They signed Melvin Gordon to a nice 2-year deal at running back. They signed Graham Glasgow to be their center, upgrading over Connor McGovern. To me, the Broncos have just had a great offseason, and I think they're going to have a pretty good draft, and I think the best addition might have been Pat Shurmur as the offensive coordinator. Again, similar to Todd Bowles on defense, he's pretty good as an offensive coordinator. Not necessarily a guy I would want at head coach, but a good coordinator. And that's something Drew Lock is going to need. And Denver's going to see this year if he's the guy or not. I think their success will hinge on whether or not he is. So it's risky putting Denver that high up based on a quarterback you've probably seen play like 6 games, but it could be a good and a bad thing. It could be good because if he just comes out guns blazing and lighting up the league, teams won't know how to game plan. But if he comes out just not being as good as hyped up to be or advertised, then it's going to backfire, and this team will probably go 7-9 and win 5 of their games thanks to defense. So it can really go either way. It's kind of risky picking Denver, but that defense, once they get rolling, they're going to play lights out. It's really going to come down to Drew Lock's performance on the field. So for now, I have to have him at number 2. And then at number 1 overall, no surprise if you know me, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers here. And the reason I say no surprise is basically in the last video I had Pittsburgh at 1. And I'm just going to say this about Pittsburgh. To me, they've had a very underrated offseason. They got a steal for Eric Ebron, 2 years, $12 million at tight end. They brought in Steven Wisniewski to be the Ramon Foster replacement at left guard, or at least fill in while they try to maybe draft and develop a guard for the future. So Steven Wisniewski, a solid veteran. He is a native. I think he went to Penn State. So yeah, he's like a Pennsylvania native. So going to Pittsburgh is pretty cool to see him kind of return home, similar to what Todd Gurley just did, except Wisniewski nowhere near as good as Todd Gurley. But this team's had an underrated offseason. They franchise tagged Bud Dupree just to see if he could replicate that year he did this past year. And the way that defense was playing, they were definitely an elite unit, or a borderline elite unit if you're not completely sold on them like me. And a lot of that had to do with TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick. I love me some Minkah Fitzpatrick. I was pretty high on him before the draft. I walked away even higher on him, thinking he was going to be like a Devin McCourty clone. And things didn't work out in Miami. He goes to Pittsburgh, and what do you know, man? Like, not only is he playing true free safety, which I honestly didn't think he would be based on how his career was going, but man, I got to give credit to Pittsburgh, man. They just seem to get the best out of a lot of these really good players. And don't be surprised if Pittsburgh's challenging for that AFC North with Baltimore. I don't think they're that far off from a team like Baltimore. And I know Baltimore's really stacked, and trust me, I'm pretty high on Lamar Jackson, as you guys know. I've been a fan of his. I've defended him in a few videos, even when he was a rookie and people were calling him garbage. Listen, man, I pulled up the stats. The tape will back it up, too. The guy actually was not that bad of a rookie quarterback. And he just won the MVP, something I didn't think he would do. But Pittsburgh, I think, can legitimately challenge Baltimore for that division. That AFC North is going to be interesting next year. If Cleveland can just legitimize itself, and who knows what Joe Burrow is going to do when he gets drafted to Cincinnati, man. That AFC North is going to be something. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Yeah, sorry about the teams I left off. You know, I guess honorable mentions, before I go, I should talk about it. The Los Angeles Rams, they were on this list. I took them off. I just feel like they're going to have a disastrous season. I hope they don't. I hope I'm proven wrong on that. But again, we'll update this a few more times before I make my official predictions. But, you know, I didn't have the Rams on here, and I didn't have the Raiders on here. To me, I need to see what the Raiders do in the draft before I put them back on here, because their free agency was kind of all over the place. Like, it wasn't bad. They made some really good moves, but their free agency was all over the place. And to me, I took them off because I need the draft to pretty much, you know, determine how high I want to put them on this list next time. So that's my explanation for those two teams not being on this list, and hopefully you guys enjoy, and peace out.